for me because I believe since Monday morning, this is now my 9th Zoom call. It's been kind of ridiculous, actually, but this is by far the best one. Anybody else get in? Let's see. See, Dan is here, and Oliver's here. Okay, good.
Yes, I'm here. I'm connecting some folks who needed a link. So we're good.
Dan, I want you to do your best to resist saying to anyone, you are the weakest link.
I saw her on the other night. Yep.
Yeah, she's still around, terrorizing people.
It could be worse. You could be the missing link.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Is that Dennis?
Yep.
All right.
Is that Terry? Yeah.
Schleimer's here. Great to see all of you. I'm gonna wait one more minute, and then we're gonna get going here.
Is that Steve or Stephanie?
It looks like things are going okay on Facebook Live. We have 4 people viewing that way.
Okay. We'll take them however we can get them. Well, let's have a word of prayer, and we will start for the night. Thank you, dear Lord. Thank you for our time together, and I give you thanks for every person who's on this call tonight, who's in this study. So many dear and precious friends, but dear and precious children of yours. So we would ask that you would go with us, and you would keep us ever mindful that as we come to talk about you and your word, we're talking about what you have left for us. Thank you for that, and we ask your presence and invite you from wherever you may be, Lord, onto this Zoom call. In the name of Christ, amen.
Amen.
Welcome back. We're going to pick up tonight in our look at the Holy Land, viewing it through the lens of Scripture, which is how we should view everything, really, but also through the perspective of our favorite Bible geographer, Dr. Jack Beck. We started last week by talking a bit about the city of Jerusalem, and how unlikely of a capital city it was when David chooses it to be the sort of center of his kingdom. Now, there were 3 things in particular which made it, we suggested, very unsuitable for that role. Does anybody remember any of those tonight? Just unmute if you do.
Water was a problem.
Water is a big problem. There's no adequate supply of water at all. There's no river that flows through it. Depended upon the rainfall, which was not very much, and on the spring of Gihon. Gihon means gushing in Hebrew, which had to be defended. Because the sort of unfortunate fact of geography was that the spring of Gihon lay outside of the city walls. It lay outside of them because David builds this city up on a kind of a hilltop with some natural steep banks going down into these ravines around both sides of it, which add a tremendous layer of some protection to it, but also mean that the spring, which is at the bottom of one of those ravines, is not in the city walls. That means that you had to find some way to protect it. Now, those of you that have been on with us on Israel study trip, hopefully have had the chance to walk through Hezekiah's tunnel, which will connect those springs on the outside of what were the city walls to a place on the inside. But we need to remember that Hezekiah doesn't build this tunnel until 300 years after King David. Okay, so David's born around about 1000 BC. Hezekiah is born around 740 BC. So you can do the math. The history of Jerusalem was always one of expansion. And in 701 BC, Hezekiah, who's a descendant of David, has come to the throne at the age of 25, which is pretty young for a king. He's going to reign almost 30 years. Hezekiah pushes the limits of Jerusalem. Remember that we said that it started with the city of David, which was the city of actually Jebus, Jebus. It was the Jebusites' town before David conquers it. And it was about 10 acres. By the time it grows a little further in David's kingdom, in Solomon's kingdom, it becomes about 32 acres. By the time of Hezekiah, it's 125 acres. And it has population has grown from about 5,000 in King David's time to about 5 times that in Hezekiah's time. And that's due in large part to a massive influx of some refugees. We've referred sometimes to Israel as the land between, meaning that it is a kind of a buffer zone for everybody and for everything. It's a land bridge, a very natural land bridge from Africa to Asia and to Europe, which makes it an important place. But if you think about it, it's a pretty narrow one. But as you say, well, that's a pretty wide space, but it's not because of the Sinai Desert, a Sinai Desert in the south and the Arabian Desert over in the east. So it's a pretty narrow strip that will come down just along the shoreline of the Mediterranean, over the sort of Shephelah or the humble hills, which is what it means in Hebrew, which are the kind of like the hill country that's in Texas, and then more of a mountainous region, and then from there it goes into the wilderness, and then it drops off pretty quickly into the Dead Sea and the Jordan River Valley, the Dead Sea being the lowest place on earth. And beyond that is the hills of Moab. And so it's not a very wide space, which means that if you're going to go from Egypt or Africa to Syria or Damascus or to Babylon or to even to India, or if you can go all the way up into the time of Jesus, what's Turkey now, and then into Europe, you're going to have to pass through this little narrow land bridge. And it's so narrow, in fact, that at one place, and we'll talk about this in a few weeks, when you come to a place called Megiddo, which opens up into the Jezreel Valley, there's a mountain pass there that you have to go through. And there is one spot at which that mountain pass is almost just one shoulder wide. Imagine all of the world's armies passing through that pass. Well, Megiddo becomes known as Har Megiddo, and Har means mountain in Hebrew. Har Megiddo, or also Armageddon, as we'll talk about it in the last book of the Bible. So there's this natural land bridge through which passes not just people, but wildlife, all kinds of wildlife. And in the times of the Bible, there aren't there now, but there are in what's Israel then, lions, bears, wolves, all kinds of animals, which you would normally put other places. they're also using that same land bridge to sort of pass through. But what it means for Israel is that being in the middle of that, they're also where the armies of the world pass through. And what you will see is that there is a constant struggle between Egypt in the south and the empires of the north, which have a succession. Ninevites and the Babylonians and the Assyrians, and then eventually the Persians, followed by the Greeks, and then the Romans. Everybody comes through there, and so this sort of little narrow place means that there's always going to be somebody after it. And in the time of Hezekiah, it is the Assyrian army which is threatening Israel, and so in turn people have fled from it because they're just ruthless. And so into the city of Jerusalem, there comes 20,000, 25,000 refugees from other parts. So all of a sudden, you've got a massive population that you have to take care of on relatively little resources. Hezekiah then builds this tunnel. It's an amazing engineering feat. 701 BC, and they built a tunnel. They dig a tunnel 1,000 feet underground that runs for about a third of a mile. Now it's only about a shoulder wide, a little bit wider in a few places. It's about 4 feet 7 inches high or deep. It's a little higher some places, but that's the kind of average height. There's water slushing in the bottom of it. And of course, it is completely dark. It's underground 1,000 feet. And there's no artificial light. So if you can imagine, how in the world do people in the 8th century BC do that? How do they pull that off as an engineering feat? It's purely, it's just a marvel. And it runs there. And if you go to Israel, you will hopefully have the chance to walk in it. It's totally dark, very claustrophobic, wet with running water, and totally fun to walk through. So if you get a chance, you should definitely walk through it. Just duck if you're over 4'7", because you're going to hit your head. Now, I say all that because to say, imagine how much work it takes to build that tunnel. It tells you how important securing a source of water is for that land and for that city. You can read about this tunnel, by the way, Chronicles 34, the second book of Chronicles 34, if you want to go back. So that's the first thing. It doesn't have much water. Well, what was the second thing? It's related to that. What do you need besides water to survive?
It doesn't have a great deal of arable land, so it's hard to produce food.
There's not much farmland there either. And now part of that is because, as you see from the videos, it's Jerusalem is surrounded or bifurcated by these 3 valleys, actually more like steep kinds of ravines. And it's kind of scruff land, some of it. And we mentioned that that the rainfall's not very regular. Even today, it only rains about 62 days a year in Jerusalem. And total rainfall average for the year in Jerusalem, 22 inches. Now we get more than that coming through our Austin Parkway porte-cochere door every time it rains. I mean, it's crazy for us. Okay, but what that means is that if you're trying to farm the land, you better be pretty good at it because you won't have an abundance of rain. And the rains come in 2 seasons, the early rains and the late rains. And you have to really know when those are and how to sort of farm around it. Jerusalem, Israel's called a land of milk and honey in the scriptures. And that sounds very lush, doesn't it? It sounds, oh, that's gonna be wonderful. Well, it's not. And when they call it that, it refers really to areas outside of Jerusalem, first of all, but areas in which there are two principal kinds of activities going on that might sort of tie you back there. One is cattle, but it's not cows. It's more goats. For the milk, goats are better because they survive on less food and scruff. The other is honey, which doesn't mean there's just tons of honey farms there. That may refer to some bees, which are kept in some places. It may also probably refers more to the palms, which are there, out of which you can extract date honey. So there is that. And if you go to the north if you go to other parts of Israel, particularly around Galilee, it is beautiful. I mean, it's arable, it's farmable. There's just beautiful land there. Sea of Galilee is lovely. And the Jordan River, which doesn't look like much now. When you see it now, everyone who sees it now is usually disappointed. Because you have it in your mind, don't you, that the River Jordan is chilly and wide, got a home on the other side, and it's flowing. Well, today it's not, because they've dammed it up and they've diverted water. So now there are places where the mighty Jordan River looks a lot like Buffalo Bayou. But in biblical days, there is 40 times the average water flow going through the Jordan River than there is now. So, I mean, there's some beautiful places up there, but Jerusalem itself, again, is not this land that's arable. It's more of a land of famine, which makes it, as Ezekiel 36 will say, a reproach among all the nations. It also makes it vulnerable. Why is that? Why does not having much farmable land cause you to be more vulnerable? Well, if you got armies coming, they can pretty much put a siege on you, can't they?
Yeah, I was just going to say that.
Yeah, and if you don't have, nice little victory gardens everywhere in town, if you're dependent upon farmable land outside the city walls, if you haven't stored up a lot of grain and a lot of food inside the city walls somewhere, you get starved out. Okay, so that is just part of the difficulty. But if all that isn't enough, there was a third reason, which we mentioned, which was that this city is a bit out of the way, and I don't. By that I mean it's a lot out of the way. It's not on any of the main roads, which you would normally expect a capital city to sort of be on. That's good news in one sense, because it means that armies which invade you have to get off the main roads to sort of make their way over to you. But it's bad news in that there's no natural trade going through you. There's no international commerce going through you. And there's just not a lot of interchange happening there, because one more time on the map, we said that there are two main roads which come from Syria down towards Egypt. There is the King's Highway, which comes down from up in Damascus. It comes along to the Sea of Galilee. It comes along to Capernaum, which is where Jesus moves his hometown headquarters to. And then it goes along on the other side of the Jordan River down. Okay, so if you take the King's Highway, you come down on the other side of the Jordan. When you get to about Jericho, there's a crossing there. Remember again, 40 times that average water flow then. So it's not necessarily easy. When the Israelites come to conquer Canaan, by the way, how do they come? They've been down in the Sinai Desert.
Sure.
How do they come? They don't come what would be a normal way, let's go over to the international highway, which runs on the coast, and just come up it. That's too dangerous. They can't really come straight up from the desert. So what do? They go over to the other side of the Jordan. You get it? Over the other side of the Jordan, Moab, Edom, those places, and they come up along that from the Dead Sea, and then they come up on the east side of the Jordan, and they have to cross over the Jordan. Now you say, well, that's not hard. Again, water flow, guys. So what do you see Joshua doing that replicates what Moses does?
He splits the river.
He splits the Jordan River. And so the same is not the same Israelites, because most of them have since died, but the same people that have come across the Red Sea by a parting of the waters now see a parting of the waters as the Jordan River somehow gets stopped up, dammed up upstream, and it becomes dry land, and the Israelites walk across it on the other side of the Jordan, where they begin their conquest. All that means, though, is that Jerusalem itself isn't in an ideal spot. So as Jack noted last time, nobody in their right mind would think of putting a capital city on that ridge, but the Lord does, because he wants the people of Israelites to depend upon not their natural defenses, not their own power. He wants them to depend solely and purely on him. I said last time, Jerusalem is a bit of a mess. I called it a beautiful mess, so I would say it's a holy mess. Some of you thought I was a bit too harsh on the city. So let me reiterate that in saying that it is a holy, beautiful mess, that is in no means a reflection of how special I think that this city is. I also said walking around in the city sometimes feels to me like I'm in a parade or I'm in a festival of some sort of like being Mardi Gras, because you will see almost every kind of apparel there. You will see Arabic robes, you will see burqas, you will see Jewish orthodoxy with all kinds of hairstyles, including men of the Hasidic faith who have a little curl in their hair coming down. You will see Orthodox and Coptic and Catholic and all sorts of Christian folks wearing all kinds of different hats, which are part of what is their garb. And I flippantly said it's like seeing costumes. Now, I will tell you, one of my younger, more woke staff members told me afterwards that was pejorative and offensive to call them costumes. And so I will apologize for that language. What I mean to say by it is that it looks foreign to most of us. It's not to say Western wear. Now you'll also see Western wear. You'll see people in blue jeans. You'll see people in very fashionable kinds of outfits. You'll see people with head coverings, people with no head coverings, people with all kinds of things. All that is to say, it is not to denigrate any faith or any tradition. It is to say that Jerusalem is a meeting of worlds, like it's always been. It's the land between. It's the place where people from everybody comes. So you and people with a vastly different worldview than us, a vastly different world perspective than most of us Westerners might have. So while I'm on the apology tour, I also told you about a young pastor whom we gave an Arab moniker nickname to. And I was told that was insensitive to a multicultural society in which we now live. And as you all know, those of us in Fort Bend County live in the most diverse county in America. This census is going to show, I believe, that we are actually 1/4 Anglo, 1/4 African American, 1/4 Asian American, 1/4 Hispanic. That'll be the only district in Congress which is so divided. So it's not to say that, those aren't important. Truthfully, all the other pastors on the trip were jealous that this young man could be mistaken for being Arabic, and the rest of us couldn't pass at all. But when you go to Jerusalem, you step immediately into a multicultural kind of experience. I think that's good. I think it's enriching. And I hope that those of you who have been there have also found that. Now, all of that brings us to the topic for tonight, which is this is a city which is home, not just one, not just two, three major faiths. That makes it holy to a whole lot of people in this world. Now, there are hundreds of religions in this world, but out of the major expressions of faith, it is these three: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, to put them in the order in which they have emerged, which share a rather significant and magnificent idea, namely that there is but one God. There is but this one God. Deuteronomy 6, for instance, we read what is called the great Shema. Shema means listen or hear in Hebrew. It's the centerpiece of Jewish thought. It is the most revered and memorized scripture for Jews everywhere. What does it say? Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Let's see if we can say it for a moment. I'll say it slow. Shema Israel.
Shema Israel.
Yeah, that's not bad. Adonai Eloheinu.
Adonai Eloheinu
Adonai Echad. Adonai Echad. Yeah, and think about it, he was just so great. You should get to kind of spit as you say it. There's a kind of a guttural sense to many of the words and the letters and the sounds. There's a response which is not in the scriptures, but which every Jew knows. Baruch Shem Kavod Malkuta La'olam Ba'ed, which means blessed be his name, whose glorious kingdom is forever and ever. So the idea of this one God is integral to Judaism from its very beginnings, but it's also integral to Christianity as well, isn't it? What was it that Paul observed about the folks in Athens when he walked around that city? We spoke on it 2 weeks ago at the Christ Church services out of Acts 17. What did he pick up on walking around Athens?
A lot of gods, many gods.
Lots of gods. Temples for everybody. At least 12 temples complexes which arise out of the agora or the marketplace, including one Paul makes notice of to an unknown God. That's in case anybody else doesn't have it right, and there's still somebody out there. Let's go ahead and build one for him. And what does Paul tell the Athenians? There's just one God, and he doesn't live in these idols. He doesn't dwell in these types of places. Even the book of James, 2 will say, James will say to people, you believe that God is one. Good for you. Even the demons believe that, and they shudder. So this idea of one God is important for us. But it's also important to Islam, because and Islam, I want to suggest to you, is a derivation of both Judaism and Christianity. When Muhammad is formulating this faith, he studies both, and he draws from both. And if you look at the list of the 25 prophets of Islam, 23 of them are in the Old Testament, or they're Jesus. Okay, so there's a lot of sort of common ground going on here. But so just as the Jews have the Shema, so Muslims have the Shahada, the Shahada. Ilaha, ilah, ilah. It's one of the 5 pillars of Islam. You find it in the Quran, in the surahs 37 and also 47. What does the Shahada say? I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his messenger or his prophet. We can go some other time into is Allah the same as Adonai or Yahweh for the Jews and God for us, and I'm going to suggest that he's not the same, but he represents, or Allah would sort of represent the same aspiration or the same longing for this connection to a divine entity. All 3 faiths then share the same basic affirmation, and Jerusalem becomes a focal point for all 3 faiths too. For the Jews, of course, there's the connection to King David and to ancient Israel. For Christians, well, the whole story of Jesus is tied up there, right? And it all ends there. But for Muslims, there is a connection too. What does Islam have to do with Jerusalem?
It's where the prophet landed on his nightly ride.
Yeah, so the Quran tells of a night vision of the Prophet Muhammad, who comes to Jerusalem in a vision and is carried up from there to heaven. Now, is there any evidence that Muhammad ever actually came to Jerusalem? No, but it's become part of the Islamic understanding. And so Jerusalem itself is considered the 3rd most holy site in the Islamic faith. Mecca, Medina, Jerusalem. This is why this one little place becomes such a pivotal focal point, again, almost a kind of a wheel in the middle of the whole enterprise. So with all that in mind, I'm going to invite you to spot in our video just a few things. Chad's going to walk us through the old city itself. Bear in mind that the city walls today, as we said last week, are not from biblical times. They're built in the 1500s by an Ottoman, a Turkish ruler, Suleiman the Magnificent. But the stones themselves go back to the time of Jesus and before. Because if you have massive stones like that, you're going to reuse them. Every time the walls are torn down, they are rebuilt eventually, and they use those same stones. And often they use the same sight lines. So that the city walls that you will see today, which are 500 years old, called the modern walls of Jerusalem, are not the same exact walls, but they're made from the same stones, and they follow much of the same lines that the city walls did in the time of Jesus and even prior to that. Now, I'll just tell you that there are a few little Easter eggs in this video. I don't think they're there on purpose, but I noticed them, and perhaps each of you will too. When we go into the antiquities shop of a Christian man named Zach, many of you have met him. He's a delightful man. He has the best antiquities shop licensed, very, very on the up and up in the old city. If you look carefully, you will see a familiar flag in the background of his shop. When we stop at a different shop, this one owned by a Muslim man, Shaban, you will see, if you look to the sort of banners flying above, a familiar university to many of you. And finally, if you've been to Israel with us, when we see a Jewish man named Tov, you may recognize him as one of the owners of the Shorashim shop, where we send people to go. It's a beautiful place, but it's run by 2 Jews who immigrated to Israel from Canada, Tov and Brother Moshe. Now, more seriously, as you watch this, think about how the Lord's presence in the temple helps you think about him today as you manage your own challenges of life. Oliver, if you'll start the video now. It's about 10 minutes, guys. Thank you.
It's shocking to see how Jerusalem has expanded and changed through the centuries. And today, there's not just one faith tradition here, but three. Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all share the skyline and story of Jerusalem. God chose Jerusalem's location even though it lacked the advantages of most capital cities. But what made Jerusalem distinct from every other city in the world was God's presence in this space. If Jerusalem is the center of the land of promise, this is its beating heart. You can feel the life of Jerusalem here, and it's always been this way. It's because the Lord chose this place, making something that it wasn't before into something extraordinary. The place where the Almighty God dwelt and lived in a special way. The Temple of Solomon, built exactly where we see the golden dome of the rock behind us, is that place. He put a building on this piece of property so that he could live in this space. And through that building, in this space, he sent a message to the world that he gave in no other location. He said, I am one, and I am with you. God says, I am one, because he says, I just need one temple. In the ancient Near Eastern world, there were many deities, and so the hills were peppered with temples. Not here. One temple, one God. The moment that temple was founded, at the time of Solomon, the divine presence came down in the form of a fire and filled the place. It was how God says, I'm present with you in a unique fashion. Certainly, God is present everywhere all the time. I believe that. But here in this place, he said, I'm present here in a unique way. The ancient Near Eastern world had never heard of such powerful things. And the only way in which God was going to get that news out was to choose to do it through a people and place. And it is through the people of this land, through that place, that these unique things get said. God's presence gave Jerusalem its voice and its mission. I want to take you to where the temple once stood and where people from all nations still come to remember God's presence today. But to get there, we need to cut through the old city streets. First thing for me, when I walk into the old city, is the smell, the spices and the aromas of all of the different foods being made here that I don't smell at home. I know I'm in the Middle East when I'm in the old city. Morning. How are you? I wonder if my friend Zach is here. How are you, brother?
Good to see you.
Good to see you. How are you? Zach has antiquities. What's the oldest piece from Old Testament, Zach, that you have in here that you're not going to let me hold? Because if it's at all fragile, I don't want to destroy an irreplaceable item. Oh, we're going into the lock cabinet. Oh, wow, look at this. A pillar figurine, yes?
Yes. This is the god of Ashtaroth. You know Ashtaroth, you know, it's beheaded.
Ashtara.
It's like an Iron Age.
Yeah. So the time of
BC.
Saul, David, Solomon, and beyond a little bit. Folks, we've been talking about this very thing. Remember that God called his people to give a unique understanding of him to the rest of the world, and this is the understanding of the divine that the rest of the world brought to God's people.
And you can see it's beheaded. So probably the Israelites cut the head.
Helping the world understand there is one God rather than God as many. Zach, thank you so much for
most welcome.
giving
Thank
us
you.
time, brother. Most of the Jerusalem city streets we're walking on, even here in the old city, are probably a good 8 to 10 feet above where Jerusalem of Bible times was. But all these pavers make the place feel old, and it's certainly the same kind of streets that people would have walked in Bible times.
Hey!
How are you doing, man? Good to see you. How you doing? I'm good, thanks. Very nice to see you. Dad is still working?
Yes.
Shaban.
You never retire. No,
How are you, brother?
Fine, good.
It's good to see you.
Good to see you.
Shaban is one of my oldest friends in the old city, and a very connected member of the Muslim community here. Thank you.
Small break.
We're on break. We're on break.
And also this meeting brings you to baklava.
And baklava. Well, I don't know if we can do the whole baklava and
No, it's good.
Jewish thing. I know, it's amazing. You've got to love it. This kind of hospitality is not mere formality. It's warm, heartfelt, and sincere. It says, you are welcome here.
As much as I love this country and as much as I love Jerusalem, I know the other religions have the same love for the city, so we have to share it more than to fight for it.
Our Jerusalem stories overlap here, don't they?
Yes,
I mean,
certainly.
it's not like there's three different Jerusalem stories.
No, it's still
There's
the same
one Jerusalem story, and we
story.
all grab a little side of it, right? Whether we're Christian or Muslim or Jewish, we all have a little part of it. Yeah. It is so wonderful to see you.
You too.
I'm so excited to have a chance to see you today. Thank you, guys. You know, when I walk through the markets, there's this sense of the old meeting the new, the West meeting the East. The languages are clearly not the languages I hear at home. And almost immediately I'm transported from sort of the Western world I live into the Middle East. It's so hard for me to walk through Jerusalem without seeing friends. So it's so good to see you. I have to tell you, because you'll appreciate this context, in the last 30 minutes that I've walked here, I've met a Christian friend, a Muslim friend, and now an observant Jewish friend.
That's what it's all about.
And that's Jerusalem. That is Jerusalem's old city, and
That's what it's all about.
That's my experience here, brother.
We've known each other for years already. We're good friends.
Everybody keeps saying that I'm meeting here, and I'm feeling older as I walk the street. No,
It's just we're getting blonder.
we're getting blonder. It's so good to see you,
Nice
brother.
seeing you.
Dove, take care.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
I come to Jerusalem to tell its stories, and as I come to tell its stories, I find that my story, Jerusalem stories, are made up of this fabric of people that are here. You've just met in the last few minutes a Christian, a Muslim, and an observant Jewish gentleman, all of whom I have a long-term relationship with here. That's Jerusalem. God used Jerusalem to speak not only to ancient Israel, but to the rest of the world as well. Today, people still come to remember the temple. This is the western retaining wall that supported the temple plaza above. Worshippers want to be as close as they can to where the temple once stood. Many write prayers and tuck them into the wall in an act of faith that here they will be heard. I've seen people come into this space during very different seasons of life and watched how the Lord used what Jerusalem is all about to minister to them. One was shortly after my dad was diagnosed with cancer, and it was his dream to come here, and it was the last trip we shared. Little did I know that, just within months after our time together here, he would go on to be with the Lord. And so I saw the Lord get him ready for his passing in this place. The brokenness of this world is not a space any of us wants us to stay in or live forever. In those moments, Jerusalem is not just a place, it is a message of peace and hope and joy, and it is restorative. It's a place that touches people at a level deeper than the cognitive. It goes to the heart. There's something different about this place. I'm really in the presence of God in some unique ways. There's a proximity to the Almighty here that makes the place different than any place else. It's stunning. to think that God's presence was right here. A presence that offered forgiveness to the world. That is what made Jerusalem's stories unique. Think about it. What a privilege it was to approach a holy God here. And it seemed like God's presence in Jerusalem would last forever.
Okay, let's see, Oliver, can you turn me back on for my?
You're gonna have to hit start video.
It says I can't do it because the host has stopped it.
Oh, well, I apologize. How about that? Try it again.
Even better, thank you.
All right.
All right. Thank you. Saw the flag, right? Texas flag in there, and what's the university you saw?
A&M.
No whooping, but it was there, yeah. Along with a host of others. I might just point out. How did you respond to this segment? I mean, what hit you as you're watching this?
The emotion in his voice when he was talking about his father and that experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've known Jack for a dozen years, and we've shared numerous times here and there. And until I watched this video, I had never heard that story. So it's not something that he talks about very much. Yeah. Anything else? Anybody saw there?
I kind of connected with his comment about the presence of God and Jesus there. It's similar to experience that I've had recently of, worshiping online. God is with you wherever you are. There's something different about being in a sanctuary, that's God's home. And the same was true in visiting Jerusalem, that it's a moving experience.
Yeah, it is a moving experience. A lot of people go to the on the Western Wall, and they have an experience there. I'll say a lot of people don't. It's not to say that if you go there and you go, oh, that's interesting, but you don't feel anything particularly spiritually tugging at your heart, there's anything wrong with you. I don't think you're kind of dense or anything. What I do think is that depending upon where you are in your own spiritual journey and in your own sense of emotions and in your own idea of what's happened, when you get there, you can sense something different. Now, why did Jews go there? Because it's not a part of the temple. The temple was completely destroyed. It is a part of the retaining wall. So just a little quick summary here, that there are actually two temples that we want to talk about in scriptures. The first one after the years and the decades in the wilderness, where the Ark of the Covenant and the Holy of Holies is in the tabernacle, which is a moving place. It can go from place to place. It's set up with tents. When the first temple's built, it's actually built by Solomon. King David rebuilds Jerusalem, builds the city walls, builds his own palace. But then he realizes there's something missing here, and the Lord says to him, "You can't build it. You're a man of war, but your son can build it." And so Solomon does it, and Solomon, who comes to the throne very young, asks for wisdom. One of the things he figures out is, I don't know how to build it. So he goes and gets the most smart people on earth, and he goes up to Tyre, which is up in Lebanon, and finds Hiram there, because Israelites don't know anything about carpentry and about wood and all of that, but the Sidonians do, because Phoenicia, it's the cedars of Lebanon, as you may have heard them. And so they're the ones who cut the walls, bring it all down. So he builds this temple, but that temple is magnificent. And if you want to read just a great passage, go over to 1 Kings 29 and read Solomon's prayer of dedication of the temple. It's just beautiful. And he says, but basically, can a place really contain you, Lord? And yet there's this promise. When the Israelites turn away from God, what is the visible act which shatters their world in many ways? It's two. One is that the Shekinah glory, or the Holy Spirit, is said to leave the temple because of the disobedience of the Israelites. And when the glory of the Lord has left it, there's something dramatically wrong with it. That temple then is torn down by the Babylonians when they conquer Jerusalem. It's left in just shambles. And if you go to see the temple, one of the things you'll notice is that there's stones down below. I mean, it was ruined. Okay, who rebuilds the temple then? The New Testament era.
Was it not Herod?
Herod the Great, and Herod's not even a full Jew. He's an Idumean, which was another way to say an Edomite, a descendant of Esau. So he's kind of a half Jew. He's kind of cousins to that. That's why the Pharisees and the Sadducees don't even like Herod, because he's not one of them really. But Herod the Great is really, really, really good at building things, and he builds this magnificent temple. But one of the things he notices is that, you know what, where we had the temple's not big enough. I don't have room there. So he decides, let's build a platform that can enlarge the area and then put the temple there. And so there's a much larger footprint for it. So to build the platform, he has to build up retaining walls and then fill it all in and build this huge platform and then put the temple on it. Okay, so what's the western wall? It's what's left of the retaining wall. It's not even a wall of the temple. It's the wall of the retaining wall that held up the platform on which the temple sat. But it is the closest Jews can get to the temple. And so they will go there. Why do they go there? Because that's where the glory of the Lord was. That's where the presence of the Lord was, in the temple. So this is as close as they can get to it. And they go there. And I think when even some Christians go there, they're overwhelmed by that sense of it. I think you can go there and go, this is a really interesting wall and there's all kinds of pieces of paper in it. But you can also go and you can think, I'm very close to where people encountered the living God. And that begins to sort of weigh upon you. Jesus, by the way, is walking by the temple one day, and they're all saying, look, Jesus, how magnificent this is. What does he say? It's all going to be torn down. Stones will all come down. And in truth, when the Romans then destroyed Jerusalem after the Jewish revolt in 70 AD, they tear out the temple too. They sort of tear it down, and they throw the rocks over the retaining wall. They throw the stones. And when I say they're stones, I mean stones are as big as a room. I mean they're huge and they weigh tons. You know, how in the world would they even get them over to the edge to push them over? But they do. And so down at the bottom, near the retaining wall, near the western wall, you see the stones, and they're all the ones which Jesus had said these stones will all be, not a stone will be left standing. So, question, why then is the Dome of the Rock built by Muslims exactly where the Temple of the Jews was?
It's isn't that where Abraham and Isaac?
There's a tradition that this is Moriah, where Abraham went to sacrifice Isaac. Remember, Abraham's one of the Islamic prophets too. Islamic folks will trace through Ishmael, not through Isaac. But there is that tradition. Is this where where it actually happens? I think that's a very open question. There's another reason though, which is that they will say that it is from this spot where Muhammad ascended into heaven in his vision, in his night vision. And if you go inside the Dome of the Rock, there is a mark where you can say, they will say that was Muhammad's footprint. That was there. So it has this very important significance for Muslims as well. But I think we ought to also recognize that there is an intentionality about building the Dome of the Rock where the temple was. And it is to say that is gone, this is now. And for Jews, for some Jews who want to see the restoration of the kingdom of Israel one day, they will have to blow up the Dome of the Rock in order to rebuild Solomon and Herod's temple there. That's why Jews aren't allowed normally up on Temple Mount. It's run, even though it's within Israel, it's run by an Arabic keeper of that place, his custodian on behalf of Islam. So it's an important place. I just share very quickly, in case someone is interested, what's been the population of Jerusalem over the decades? Well, in the first century, it is a majority Jewish population, yes. By the 5th century AD, Jews are in a minority in Jerusalem. Majority population is Christian. They remain in a minority through the 14th century, at which time Christians also become a minority, because from the 12th century on, Muslims are in the majority population in Jerusalem. To give you some idea, in the 1530s, there are 5,000 Jews in Jerusalem, 6,000 Christians, 145,000 Muslims. And that's about the ratio that kind of holds for it. In 1947, when the separation comes and Israel is formed, there are roughly 630,000 Jews in Jerusalem, 143,000 Christians, and 1,000,001 Muslims there. So you've got a kind of a varied population all the way through. But the point is that Jews are not really in the majority population in Jerusalem from the last 8 centuries on. But I'll also say with you that it is not until after the Crusades, the 11th century, 12th century, 13th century, that the Muslims really care about Jerusalem until they see the intense interest in Christians in Jerusalem. It's not all that special of a place for them. And though there'll be various Muslim empires ruling over Israel over the last 1,200 years, Jerusalem's never the capital for those places. And even when it's not even the district capital for the province for most of those years. So it has a kind of an interesting history as you go through. Bottom line, God's presence was felt to be there. And Jerusalem is meant to be not simply a special place for Jews. It's meant to be a witness to the world of this living God. So that is why it's going to be so devastating when the conquest and the exile come. That'll be our topic for next week. Why is Jerusalem's destruction so significant? We're going to look at from exile into new hope. So I hope you can join us for that time. We want to always say a word of thanks to Dr. Jack Beck and Our Daily Bread, who is the producer of these films, for the permission to show them in this venue. We have written permission from them for that, and that's a significant thing for us, and we're very grateful for that. Something else that I'm supposed to say, Dan. What is that? Yes, that since we're now done and it's too late, I will tell you for future times. If you don't know, there's a nice chat feature in Zoom, and you're welcome to use that throughout and to post questions or to share ideas or thoughts. When we come to that next week, perhaps someone who is not rapidly growing senile can remind me to sort of mention that, and we'll try to make that the case. Anybody want the last word for tonight? Okay, thank you so much for being here. Thanks again to Oliver for facilitating this, and to Dan. We will see you next Tuesday when we plunge into the exile. Good night, everybody.
Hi, guys.
Night.
Night.
Night.